The Arab Spring started in the winter of 2010 in Tunisia, when a fruit and vegetable vendor by the name of Mohamed Bouazizi set himself on fire to protest his years of being abused by authorities and his frustration over not being able to provide for his family. Through his symbolic self-immolation, he ignited the Arab Spring.
As many of us know, the Middle East is a land of oil. Most of the money is collected by the Al Saud family. Their wealth is worth an approximate $1.9 trillion, and a majority of this revenue comes from the massive oil industry. The controversy we face today is what should this money be used for? The lower class believes that it should be evenly distributed throughout the economy and in hopes that this would help the nation prosper. The royal families have a quite different suggestion. They take their own money and begin purchasing finer things, investing it into the U.S. stock company, or even dividing it among the other royal families. Today we are here to inform the public about this issue. Typically, the media is controlled by the government to keep this negative matter out of the media. In Saudi Arabia, there is a similar situation. They have approximately a total of 267 billion barrels of oil reserves, in which they grant the U.S. access to. The money from the oil revenue is not evenly distributed in the economy, and Saudi Arabia is known to be one of the most unequal societies on the planet. On the other hand, in Iraq, now the number 2 supplier of oil in the world, their revenue has made its way down to the lower class. Their country has seen a remarkable benefit in their daily lives.
I'm Caitlin Glover. The Arab Spring was made possible by, oddly enough, a fruit and vegetable vendor named Mohamed Bouazizi. To protest years of being abused by authorities and earning barely enough to sustain himself and his family, he purchased gas, went to the governor's office, and set himself on fire on December 17, 2010. After his death a few weeks later, over 5,000 people marched at his funeral procession, and soon this death of a street vendor became the inspiration for a generation to fight back and challenge the authority that had left their lives in despair. Bouazizi's story of helplessness, persecution, and retribution spoke to the masses. Within 5 months, protests broke out across the world, from Syria to Bahrain, Morocco to Saudi Arabia, Tanzania to Jordan. A generation of desperate, frustrated Arabs took to the streets to argue reforms. Monarchs and autocrats who preserved their power through militaries willing to crush anti-government sentiment were the first to be exposed. Next were the heads of state that siphoned off oil revenue instead of distributing it back into the economy. Next came the corrupt government officials who lived off kickbacks and taking bribes before administering health care and children into schools. Thanks to the efforts of one man, the masses of people begging to be heard can finally voice the corruption that's been plaguing their nations for years. What will happen to the Middle East? No one knows, but they're already off to a good start.
The monarchs and autocrats in the Arab world preserved their power through militaries willing to crush any anti-government sentiment. Corrupt government officials lived off kickbacks. The police, hospitals, and schools took bribes. President Ben Ali stole billions from Tunisia's treasury that he deposited in Swiss bank accounts. President Hosni Mubarak of Egypt stashed billions in gold bars in England, millions in private jets, villas, and hotels scattered across Europe and the United States. Hosni Mubarak also set up secret prisons to hold anyone that wanted to go against him. Muammar Gaddafi of Libya used his fortune to fund his plastic surgery and had secret sex caves set up around the country. Money was hoarded by the leaders and governments of these Arab nations while millions of their citizens suffered in poverty. The corrupt governments of these nations did everything in their power to conceal this corruption, but alas, the truth came out. Waves of protest hit the Arab nations after WikiLeaks exposed years of hidden corruption.
Thank you, Nadine. The Middle East has had a handful of corrupt leaders. For example, Iraqi Prime Minister Malik spent the last of his years in power reinterpreting his executive powers. He chose not to enforce and improve legislation. He put military officers in position of authority, and he uses the Iraqi army for his own personal security force, arresting those who object his policy. And then we have Mubarak from Egypt, who spent his time in power arresting people who didn't agree with him, such as a group of political activists who were caught spray painting anti-government graffiti on a wall. They were imprisoned without trial and then had their information hidden. His successor was Morsi, who pursued his own plans for solving political strifes despite the safety of his people. These were just a few examples of the corruption there in the Middle East.